Okay, let's take a quick look at error checking in Python. So we'll just create a new file called error. And let's say we want to do something simple like calculate the speed of something. So we're going to ask for the distance traveled. Okay, and then we'll need the time. So we'll ask for that. Same basic setup. And then the calculation speed is just distance divided by time. And then of course if everything goes well, we can just print. So let's try this out. And so if we put in something like 10 feet in 5 seconds, that works out okay, 2 feet per second. But if we go in and we put something in weird like W as a distance in feet, kind of blows up on us. So we're going to look at how do we handle those errors. And so the way we do that in Python is something called a try block. So we'll do a try, and then since that's a block, we need to indent all the pieces of code that we're going to try. So we'll just tab that over. And then to handle exceptions, we have some excepts. So first one, we'll just do except, and we'll do the general exception. And we'll go ahead and create a variable and do that as E, so we can look a little bit more at what the error is. And so all we'll do here is print some type of custom error message. So I'll just put error, and then I want a little bit more information. So we'll look at what the type is for E, and we'll also look at E itself so we can see the message of what happened. And we actually get some of that built in with Python. It's going to be similar to this here, but we'll run this. I just like to put a general exception at the bottom of my error handler to catch anything I wasn't necessarily expecting. So let's run that, and I'll put W in again here. And of course now my custom error handler runs, and it prints the type, which is value error, and specifically couldn't convert the string to float, and then it gives me that data value. So what I'm going to do here is go in and find or catch that specific type of error. So I'm just going to do except value error. Okay, and then I can do something specific there, and so I can just say print some sort of descriptive message. And so now because we're using the type, it should catch here instead of our general exception. So let's test that and make sure that's working. So we'll go down here and put W in again, and now this exception, and it will only run one. So since the value error ran, it's not going to run the general exception. So we've got our specific error handling running at that point. Okay, so that should also work for our next input. So if we put the first one in, valid 3, and then we put in something, some sort of letter for the second input, it'll also catch the value exception. If we put both in that are correct values, but we also could potentially get a division by 0 here. So time in seconds here, if we put in 0, we get a division by 0 error, which we haven't checked for. So we're going to get our general exception handler here, print this error message and give us the type. So we can go back in here and say except. Okay, and now we can do a 0 division error and put in whatever custom error message we want to put in, or whatever handling. So we'll do print, and I'll just say error, the time cannot be 0. So now we'll have this handle the case where we put in 0 for time. This part of the error handling will catch. So one other thing we can do is loop around as we're trying to get valid inputs. If they mess up, instead of having to run the script again, we may want to prompt the user. So we'll go up to the top and we'll just put this in a loop. And so we'll just say while true. We're just going to keep running this thing over and over again. If we get exceptions in here, it's going to run the appropriate exception handler. And then since we're in this loop, it's going to try again. So if we are successful, we want to stop. So I will go ahead and put in a break statement here. So if all these statements run successfully, we'll break out of the loop. If not, we're going to start back at the beginning, but it's going to ask us each question. So it's going to start back at the distance up there. So let's run this, and we'll see for distance in feet. If we put in a letter, it's going to go back to the top of the loop and say, hey, enter distance in feet. You kind of messed that up. But if we get that one right, and then we mess up for seconds, it's still going to say, hey, error on the last input. It's going to restart the whole loop, and so we'll come back to the top again and enter distance. So I'll put in 3 this time, and let's put in 0, which should cause another exception, and we get that error message. And again, we're in this loop, so until we put the proper input in, it's just going to keep asking. So let's put in a couple of values here, and we get finally get the correct value, so it prints out our speed, and then we break from that loop. If you have already looked at creating functions in Python, you could do this a slightly different way. So I'm just going to back up a little bit and go back to here, and then I'm going to create a definition just to get input numbers. So I'm going to define a function just called get number that will help me validate it. And so for that, I want to be able to change the prompt. Okay, and then inside this function, I'm going to go ahead and do that loop. So I'll just say while true, and then I'm going to do my try block. So I'm going to try, and then I just want to get input. So I'm going to have a return value is equal to, and again, this time I'm getting floating point for both of my inputs. So I'm just going to say float and input whatever prompt is passed in. And then if all goes well, I will just return that value. Okay. As opposed to breaking from the loop, it's a little bit different for a definition. And then actually here I'm going to have a very similar setup here. So I'm just going to grab some of my error checking from here and paste that in up here. We can actually get rid of the division by 0. I think we're safe there. We're just grabbing input. So I'm going to leave some of this here as far as the exception handling. And now I don't need a break because I will break out of a function by saying return. So the return will exit the function. So that's how we're going to get out of this, I guess, potentially infinite loop with the while true. We're going to need to go down to our first part. And so instead of doing an input statement here, we're just going to say get number. So we'll call that function. And we don't need that extra parenthesis on the end, so we'll get rid of that. And we can do that for both of these. So we'll go down here, call it again, get number. Okay. And so now we've got the loop inside the get number function, so it's going to stop us as soon as we get a bad input. So we'll run this. We ask for feet, so if we put in an invalid thing like W here, it's going to say, hey, invalid for that. It asks us for feet again, so we'll go ahead and type in a valid number this time. And then the seconds, we'll type in a letter, and so now it's reprompting us for seconds, so we'll put in a number there. And we can step through, I guess, a little bit more refined there and just ask for the last input that was incorrect. The other thing we can do besides error handling, because we can still put in that time of 0, so we could right here, instead of doing error handling, just check and say if time is not 0. Okay. Then we'll go ahead and do the calculation, and we'll print the speed. Else we can put some sort of message indicating that time cannot be 0, and we can actually just use a similar message here to handle that. So we can use pretty much a simple decision structure to avoid hitting that divide by 0 here. So you have a choice there whether to do it this way or leave your exception here. You don't really need both, but do one or the other. So just a quick introduction to how to do error handling in Python.